Welcome to Utah Stories, all new 5 Questions podcast. My name is Richard Markosian. I'm the editor and publisher of Utah Stories magazine. So I'm going to introduce you to this podcast. Today on the program, we're talking about George Soros and 5 questions related to him. Those questions are, who is George Soros and why should you care? How does he have anything to do with Utah and Utah's housing scarcity, housing prices? What does he have to say and do with our current immigration problems? What can be done to thwart globalist policies and their agenda? And how can we work towards more Utahns owning and affording housing? Those are our 5 questions. If you're not familiar, if you haven't been following us, this podcast is dedicated to housing affordability, homelessness, some of the big issues impacting the quality of life here in Utah. We've been tackling these problems by asking just a lot of questions the rest of the local media is not asking, such as why can't anybody afford housing? Who is stopping us from being able to afford housing? And why is it little to nothing being done? This is our current issue of Utah Stories magazine. It's really doing incredibly well. It's all about the people who are making tons of money, getting rich off failed homeless housing projects. We researched this topic for 4 months to bring you this article, and there are seriously people getting rich off of failed homeless housing projects. There's 3 of them we profile in this issue. If you're in downtown Salt Lake City, you can probably still pick it up in some select locations, or you can subscribe to Utah Stories magazine for $3 a month. I think it's an excellent price, and you support our intrepid local journalism that really does ask questions that other media outlets do not ask. All right, so why am I looking at George Soros and his open society's agenda? Who is George Soros? So George Soros is one of the world's richest men. He's a billionaire philanthropist, and he has a very clear political agenda. There's a lot that he says that is wrong with the world that I would absolutely agree with. I decided to do my own research about him because a lot of political commentators just kind of parrot the same talking points, that he's an evil billionaire, that he's out to destroy freedom and democracy. That's not exactly what I found. There's a lot of right-wing talking points, and they basically just say he's an evil nut job. But is he really? So let's look at his most prominent philanthropic effort. It's this huge, massive organization that's now spanned 3 decades called Open Societies. If we can pull that website up, Allegra, what they tout on Open Societies is that they want... They want to solve the problem of the big disparity between, the first thing he wanted to solve was the big disparities that existed between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And he has what he defines as closed societies, which are Eastern Bloc countries, which do not have enough free trade, which try to protect their economies by protective economic measures. And if you go through, starting in 1979, what he wanted to do to build a more open world, George Soros basically wanted to start funding for university students in South Africa to have more access to education. Awesome. Keep moving through. Let's go up all the way to like 1985 or before the Berlin Wall. He wanted to support democracy in China. He wanted to encourage dismantling the Iron Curtain, all really good things, fostering connections in former Soviet bloc countries. He helped Central Europe open its doors. Go here to helping Sarajevo survive. So after the Bosnian War, there was a huge humanitarian need. He funded a lot of basic services for people who needed services in Macedonia, Kosovo, and Albania. If we keep going on, just did a lot of really great philanthropic efforts all over the world, donating huge amounts of money. 1994, more work in South Africa. But now let's go forward all the way to 2006, around there. Just scroll way down. It's just going to take some time. So he starts to get involved in more disability rights, more people with American Disabilities Act, the framework for advocating rights for people with disabilities. Keep going down. Accountability in Afghanistan. A lot of geopolitical things going on, again in Africa, helping people with earthquake relief, and then in Latin America. And so what we start to see is that it's about trying to create more justice for third world countries, more things that are going on, getting more countries involved in geopolitical problems. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with his agenda? What's wrong with open societies? There's just one big problem. And now I sourced my research based on a Guardian article that was written just a couple of years ago. And I'm going to quote this article. Since 1987, Soros has published 14 books, a number of pieces in the New York book reviews of books, New York Times, and elsewhere. These texts make it clear that, like many on the center left who rose to prominence in the 1990s, Soros' defining intellectual principle is his internationalism. For Soros, the goal of contemporary human existence is to establish a world defined not by sovereign states, but by a global community whose constituents understand and everyone shares an interest in freedom, equality, and prosperity. In his opinion, the creation of such a global open society is the only way to ensure that humanity overcomes the existential challenges of climate change and nuclear proliferation. So still, I do not disagree. I don't disagree that rich nations should help poor nations. I don't disagree that philanthropy should drive rising up people out of poverty and helping them out. So, but why does George Soros want to see us all live in a global open society, as he puts it? Because he believes capitalism has great limits and great problems. He believes nuclear proliferation and climate change and how capitalism has morphed into something like a global arms and technology and capital race have very dire implications if left unchecked. He believes we will have a climate catastrophe if things do not change. It isn't very hard to disagree with Soros in his assessment, but I have a problem with his cure. Soros is not an anti-capitalist, but he is an ardent anti-nationalist. But why shouldn't this be good? Hitler was a strong nationalist. Mussolini was a nationalist. Nationalism equals war. So what Soros believes that we should do is evolve as a human species and consider giving up on the idea of strong nation states competing against each other for scarce resources and for military domination. So it's also still hard to disagree with Soros at this point. So I want you to understand all the points we could probably all agree on. Like always competing for like the nickel that's in Guyana or these African nations where these new capitalist regimes open up mines and basically decimate populations because of the horrible working conditions. I wouldn't disagree with any of that. But what's wrong with giving up on borders? What's wrong with giving up on the idea that we are a nation, we have borders, this is the confines of our borders, and the citizens who live inside of these borders have different rights than the citizens who live outside of these borders. I had a big conversation about this with Michael Valentine here on this podcast, and the problem is basically one of security. You can only provide security to a certain number of people within a certain geographic area with a certain amount of money. And there's not an infinite supply of security and arms to provide security for all of the world's population. It's just not possible. And what is it that defines America? What is it that makes people want to cross our borders and come into this country more than anything else? You ask, I've got a friend who I just spoke to this morning at his coffee shop. His name's Kong. He was on our podcast. It's the ability to have security, to the ability for the government or any entity to just come in and take your home anytime they feel like it. That is what open borders would, that's absolutely what would happen if open borders were our policy. If we just let everybody in, there's absolutely no way our local police departments could stay intact, our National Guard could stay intact, our U.S. military could stay intact. There's no way the rights that we enjoy in this country, we call the United States, could stay intact if everybody were just simply here all of a sudden. And we see that happening in the United States today. We see the breakdown of law and order in our city centers. We see what's happening with essentially an open border policy. And that's why, answering my question number 2, what does George Soros have to do with Utah? He's an important figure because essentially we are disregarding our laws. Something that was brought up in the comments section of our Instagram account was that calling them illegal immigrants is racist. That's a derogatory term. No, it isn't. It's a correct and accurate term because there's legal immigrants. My wife is a legal immigrant. Kong, who owns this great coffee shop here in town, he's a legal immigrant. His wife's a legal immigrant. But illegal immigrants who enter our country illegally, they did not forget some critical piece of documentation that they left at home. They're not undocumented. They're here illegally, and we need to abide by our laws and rules and regulations for entering this country legally. Otherwise, everything will go to disarray and chaos. If you disagree with this, then feel free to comment below. But so why not just give up with and decide everyone's a citizen of the world and everybody's entitled to rights? The problem is, then what entity is going to guarantee these rights? There would have to be an overarching, massive world government entity that could be the world police that could go down to the granular level and enforce all of these rights that the people like Michael Valentine want to have. And I think it's worth considering where capitalism is breaking down, where it does have its faults. I wouldn't disagree with it at all. But it reminds me of something I thought about a lot when I was in my 20s. I was a huge Beatles fan. I think the Beatles are the greatest band of all time, and I thought a lot about John Lennon's song called Imagine, and the lyrics of that song are, imagine there's no countries, it isn't hard to do, nothing to kill or die for, no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Imagine it. I was just like, why not imagine it? Why not? And it's exactly what I just spelled out. If everyone could just cross any border they want at any time they wanted, obviously criminal elements would undoubtedly come up, and we can always imagine a utopian ideal where the world is a much better place, but it always comes back to human nature. Human nature is such that certain percentage of the population will want to commit crimes, will want to victimize other people, will want to get things for free, and you have to always account for human nature, which is a lot of people are sinners, and a lot of people are going to do and take things that don't belong to them, and we have to have law and order in place to account for that. So in my early 20s, I was a lot different. I thought exactly like John Lennon did in his 20s, and a lot of people I can see think that way, but it just doesn't work. If you begin to study economics, what the first rule of economics is that it's the proper allocation of scarce resources is what the basis of all economic thought is. We don't have infinite supply of resources, so you have to consider how is it that we can best provide the most abundance for the most number of people. And what you find is that there is not an infinite abundance of money, resources, housing, food, and especially security to provide to every citizen in the world. Resources are indeed finite, and not every country or culture is created equally. The only way to tap the most efficient way of providing these scarce resources to the most effective and efficient manner is to constantly give entrepreneurs incentives and opportunities to develop new technologies to become massively wealthy. And that might not sound fair. Unfortunately, we're all forced to share everything with everyone. If we were forced to share everything with everyone, there would be no way there would be this massive race to the top of entrepreneurs in developing the latest and greatest technologies, which ultimately produce more wealth and more prosperity for everyone. So how do I know this is true? How do I know we cannot just share everything? I would highly recommend you take a look at reading the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It shows what Stalin had to do, what special measures he had to take when the Soviet Union conducted their Marxist experiment to share all the wealth of the Soviet Empire. I mean, obviously they had abundant resources, abundant natural resources, abundant numbers of people, and they thought they could just share everything and make everything more just and more fair. And what we see in the Gulag Archipelago is what the reality had become, which was there were not enough people willing to work hard for the state when they didn't own land. There weren't enough people to strive to do better and better things. And the result was 10 million people had to die in death camps in these gulags spread out all throughout the Soviet Empire. Don't take my word for it. Really read that book, and that will shed light on it. But what one also learns from studying basic economics is that the primary driver of human achievement and economic success is the promise that a very few number of people will earn massive amounts of money trying to achieve extremely difficult feats of technological breakthroughs. And the amounts of money they earn, by all witnesses, doesn't seem fair. Why shouldn't the billionaires all pool their money together and give everyone free housing? Why shouldn't they do that? I won't give you the answer to that one, but think about it. Think about the flaw of housing as a human right. There is an essential flaw, and my job, I don't think, is to tell you how to think, but to get you thinking. And there is a fundamental flaw to that logic of housing as a human right. And I've read it in our comments once, but you think about that and you answer for me, what is the flaw of that in our comments section below. I've really appreciated the comments, by the way. It's really what's built our momentum and kept this channel going strong. All right, so finally, why should you care about this? Because if you examine cities today and you examine urban centers, if you examine our border today, you examine the 14 million new illegal immigrants that have come across the border in the last 10 years, we see what we have with the open societies agenda. I think that George Soros and his cronies are driving many of our nation's policies. We are seeing open societies at our southern border. We are seeing the impact of open societies in our cities. So that's what George Soros has to do with Utah's current homeless and housing problem. He's donating huge sums of money to soft-on-crime district attorneys getting elected in cities. And I showed a chart on our Instagram page a while back. He's really effective at getting these district attorneys elected in the biggest cities across America, who basically want to be soft on crime and let hardened criminals get out. And we see that here in Utah too. And the problem is there are just way too many criminals who are victimizing the most vulnerable homeless in Salt Lake City. And I see the impact of that is people get sucked down this poor tube of homelessness and they can't get out because they end up being victimized by homeless criminals. And those people are not going to prison because, as we found out by having Salt Lake City District Attorney Sim Gill on this program, they could be committed as criminally insane, but never serve any time in prison, never get locked up because they are not capable to stand trial as being insane. And so all these insane people are wandering the streets without a place to go. We have a mental health crisis on our hands here in Utah, as well as we have in most big cities. And that problem is not being solved by open societies. It's being exacerbated. And so what's the solution? So certainly we need to regain control of law and order in our cities, or we are doomed to accept a radical agenda. How do you get a radical agenda passed? Is if we see massive amounts of chaos, anarchy, unlawfulness in our city centers. We're beginning to see that now, and I'm afraid that they're going to try to come in and come up with a radical agenda like a world police type program. I believe strongly we need to return to an ownership society where we need to allow housing to become affordable and attainable for a much larger percentage of our population. Utah leaders need to take action on this as the number one new biggest challenge. Gen Zs, people in their 20s to 30s, need to be able to afford not to just rent an apartment. They need to be able to afford to own housing. That's how you get people with an ownership mindset. That's how you get people to build equity, to gain financial independence, to gain a hope for retirement, and to gain political independence. If everybody's renting and nobody is able to build equity, you're not going to have people with an aspiring mindset where they're going to be franchised into this whole economic reality that we have in America right now. So this is entirely possible. We should never accept that an entire new generation of Americans will own nothing and be happy, as these folks who agree with Soros aspire from Davos, Switzerland, and the World Economic Forum. Utah has plenty of land, plenty of resources, plenty of ways we could drive housing down and to affordable levels so that thousands of people could once again afford to own, not rent housing. All right. So that is it for the Utah Stories 5 Questions podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this content, consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. The best way to be part of what it is we're doing, 2 ways. Go out to utahstories.com, subscribe to our free digital newsletter, absolutely free. We'll send it to you every week in email. Or you can subscribe to the magazine, as I said before, for $3 a month. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.